This week's episode of the 2000s Chart Show features the Richard Ashcroft song Words Just Get in the Way. And you know what, Richie? You're right. So welcome to the first ever silent edition of the 2000s Chart Show. Sorry, Richie. I guess we need words for this audio medium.
The 2000s Chart Show. The 2000s Chart Show.
Hello, this is the 2000s Chart Show, the podcast where every week we are reliving the 40 biggest selling songs from this week 20 years ago, telling the stories of all the new entries. It's all the 2000s pop music history that you need, your weekly dose from me, Samuel Spencer. How are we all out there? This week we are also the podcast that knows I'm unfaithful and it kills him inside to know that I am happy with some other guy. That lyrics from Rihanna, who is back with her fourth single, Unfaithful, still yet to have a number one. Closest she's got is SOS, which got to number 2, as did Ponder Replay. Will she be able to go one further and knock Lily Allen off the top spot? If she does, she will be the 5th female solo singer in a row to do that, already breaking the record that was set last week. However, there are some big other artists who are going to try and stop her from doing that. Gnarls Barkley with their follow-up to the biggest selling song of the year, Crazy.
Keep on smiling for me.
The first song by middle of the road ballad peddler James Morrison. Shayne Ward is still trying to prove that he can have a career post-X Factor. And Rooster are trying to prove that they can have a career full stop. We'll see who achieves what as we head into this week's top 40, 10 new entries from between the 16th and the 22nd of July 2006. Let's get into them.
The top 40.
That means, of course, kicking off with the
Bargain Bin.
These are the songs on our list from 30 to 40, songs that flopped and songs that are on their way to the top. It's the former we'll be talking about first. He got his first single from this album, Break the Night with Colour, all the way to number 3, but things have fallen off slightly since then. Music is Power, a number 20 in April 2006, and now Words Just Get in the Way.
40.
Words, they just get in the way.
Richard Ashcroft is the last in the royal line of gobby frontmen that began with Ian Brown right down to the bandy legs and unshakable self-belief, said Q magazine, who called this song one of the album's 2 great weepy 4am ballads. Who here is having his last top 40 hit as a solo artist, although he will have another and indeed another top 10 when he reunites with The Verve in 2008. Of course, most interviews in 2006 he spends talking about how he will never reform The Verve, of course meaning that it was less than 18 months before they started talking about it. The lyrics of this song: when you've given all you've got and you're feeling overcome, when your back's against the wall, there's no one left to call, call me. When your head is so full that you feel misunderstood and the fear is coming fast, you think your time has passed, you say, why me? Why me? If you want it, you know I've got it. Words, they just get in the way. As you can probably tell from that, lyrically this song is just taking Bridge Over Troubled Water and Carole King's You've Got a Friend and just mushing them together into a sort of chicken nugget of a ballad, giving Richard Ashcroft his last taste of chart glory. This is a weird time for him. It's a time when a lot of his proposed projects don't end up happening. He threatened to release a World Cup song in 2006, but then he didn't go ahead with it, meaning he was pretty much the only person in the entirety of Britain who didn't release a World Cup song, as we explored in previous episodes. He also was promising an album with the plunderphonic DJ Shadow. They had previously collaborated on the Uncle song Lonely Soul, but that album never materialised for some reason. Probably because in 2006, Ashcroft mentioned he was taking Prozac to help him deal with clinical depression. However, he has since released a number of albums and maintained a spiky relationship with the press after Enemy gave his 2018 album Natural Rebel a 2-star review. He filmed an Instagram video of him setting fire to the magazine. However, as we talk here, he is in pretty much the best form that he has been in. In 20 years, he was the support act on the Oasis tour, after which he released a single sampling Joan Armatrading's Love and Affection, a lesbian anthem, thoroughly straightened out by Richard Ashcroft. You thought he would have learnt his lesson from having to pay all of the royalties to his biggest song to the Rolling Stones after a Bittersweet Symphony copyright dispute, but seems not. That was the first single from his most recent album, Lovin' You, which weirdly features a collaboration with Merway, who is best known for his creating Madonna's most odd electronic moments. He produced her albums Music and American Life, and is a definite character in my recent video about Madonna's Hung Up, which you can check out over on our YouTube. As this is the last time we'll be talking about Richard Ashcroft until the reformation of The Verve in 2008, we'll leave the last word to him when he was asked by a Q magazine reader, "My mate in Wigan says you shot him with an air rifle when you were younger. Did you?" Well, he doesn't supply a name, but it's very possible. I remember riding my rally grift around Wigan and meeting a guy on a hill and swapping my bike for an air pistol. I was a good shot. I could take the head off a daisy at 200 yards, but I can't imagine aiming my gun at anyone. I was more of a stone thrower. I remember hitting this lad on the forehead once. It made a sound like wood cracking. It was a sickening sound. If I'd had a sampler in them days, it would have made an amazing percussion loop. Richard Ashcroft, a interesting mad presence on these charts who will be slightly missed. And I really like that Verve song, actually. For now, though, we have to head to the other new entries in our bargain bin. First, some songs that have been hanging around for a while. We'll see whether any of them have gone slightly stale or indeed fully gone off.
39.
Keen's Is It Any Wonder? Is It Any Wonder that's been on the chart for 2 months? What with it being such a great song and a darker, more brooding release from Keen.
38.
Danny California, that's now reached its 3rd month on the chart. I'm going to look this up, but that must make it almost certainly Red Hot Chili Peppers' biggest chart hit. California. Yes, the answer is to that. It is. Well done to them. Unlike Kelly Clarkson definitely not getting her biggest hit with the track Breakaway, which is here at
37.
after just a month on the chart.
36.
It's a 14-place drop for Jamie T with Sheila.
Tell all the fellas that the lady is single.
35.
It's the Beat Freaks telling us that somebody's watching me. Put your blinds down, love.
34.
Faster Kill Pussycat, Oakenfold and Brittany Murphy. That song's chart placement isn't quite killed yet. 9-place drop for that as it reaches its 2nd month.
Honey, you know where the world is at.
Taking us to our 2nd new entry on this chart. The last appearance for a band that had great promise, I thought, at the beginning, and then got totally mixed up about who their fan base was, and it is that has destroyed them. This will be their last top 40. It's in at number
33.
It's Rooster with Home. And they'll be going home soon because they won't have jobs in this band anymore. Their all-music biography begins. Despite being more indebted to 70s rock than Blink-182 style power pop, UK 4-piece Rooster was still, perhaps unfairly, lumped in the same teen rock category as Busted and McFly. As we've said before on this show, that's because they were aimed at that audience. They were constantly on kids' TV. I wouldn't have seen them as much as I did were they not. You can't complain that you're being targeted at one audience and then you're not getting the audience that you want. It's clear that Rooster saw themselves in one way that their record company didn't, and it's this fundamental mismatch that has left their career to fizzle out after 2 top 10 hits with which they kicked off their career, including the, in my opinion, rather brilliant Come Get Some. The band were Nick Atkinson, Luke Potashnik, Dave Neal and Ben Smith. Nick Atkinson had previously been part of a new metal outfit called 50 Grind, who had a song on the Pokemon movie soundtrack. Started writing songs with his childhood friend Luke Potashnik. They named the band after a horse that Atkinson won 250 quid on. Their first single reached number 7 in 2004. They became the first group to broadcast a live concert over the 3G mobile phone network. You'll always have that, guys. Their second single went even further, Staring at the Sun, all the way to number 4, took their debut album to number 3, although follow-up singles, You're So Right For Me and Deep and Meaningless didn't do so well, 14 and 29 respectively. However, the sales of their album was enough for them to warrant a second one. However, the lack of success of this first single from it means that it was pushed from its July release date to October, ends up charting at number 196. They have argued that they got a hard time from the press. One journalist asked them, "What's the worst question you've ever been asked?" And they said stuff like, "Who's the smelliest person in the band? Which of you have girlfriends?" But the worst had to be, if you could marry any other member in the band, who would it be? I would say that's a pretty normal question to ask someone, unless you're homophobic. I could tell you which one of my friends I'd marry in an instant. It's not about attractiveness, it's about who do you want to spend your life with. The fact they couldn't do that suggests they find the idea of homosexuality disgusting, and therefore, we're done with you here, Rooster, because this is a gay rights podcast, even now we have moved out of Pride Month and entered, of course, into shame rest of the year. This second album gives them a much more polished sound. They worked with the same producer as Maroon 5's Songs About Jane, which they surely thought as a good route for them to go with their second album, even if it's not working. This song got heavy radio support, but still missing the top 30. And even as they try and move away from a comparison with Busted, they can't quite help but make one. That producer is Matt Wallace, who, apart from the fact his name sounds like Matt Willis, also ends up producing the second Fight Star album, of course, the band that Charlie from Busted ended up in. They released a second download-only single called Good to Be Here, which was taken from the Stormbreaker soundtrack, a song I've definitely heard because I was obsessed with the Stormbreaker books as a child and definitely saw that film. I was probably the only person in Britain who thought it was good. None of this, however, enough to regain interest in the band, and so by 2007 they announced on their MySpace page that they had broken up. Over Christmas we'd all had time to think about Rooster, the future and ourselves. Unfortunately we have all decided that now's the time to go our separate ways. We've had the most amazing 4 years and have all loved every single minute of it. We feel privileged to have some of the most up for it committed fans who were as much part of the atmosphere of our shows as us, and our music was. I'm sorry that it has taken us so long to let you guys know, but as you can imagine, we didn't make this decision lightly. Hope to see some of you in the future as we all look onwards and upwards. Nick Atkinson has since become an in-demand songwriter. His top 2 songs on Spotify have combined streams of over 1 billion. The most played is Dean Lewis's Waves, which I've literally never heard of, but has 730 million streams. His second most played track is Grace by Lewis Capaldi with 373 million. This maybe suggests that songwriting was where Nick Atkinson should have been, seeing as their top 2 songs on Spotify have less than 200,000 streams between them. As for Luke Potashnik, he ends up playing guitar on the 4th One Direction album, the first Paloma Faith album, and in a sign that Rooster were not bringing in the cash, in 2006 he played on Take That's reunion album, recorded this year. So goodbye to Rooster, you had potential for a tiny bit of time before you really got in your heads about the fact that you're a serious band and sort of made all of your female fans feel bad for liking you. I certainly prefer you to the dregs of landfill indie that we have to dredge through in this current era, and would you believe it, that is very pertinent of our next track on this list. I remember this band even being a punchline among those people who were still into indie music in 2006. Although shout out to my friend Lucy, who showed me her old scrapbook of ticket stubs and saw them at least twice. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you were buying, at 32, a new entry, Milburn with Cheshire Cat Smile.
Just one love, here we go again.
So let's talk about Milburn. Not to be confused with Millwall, the football team, although sort of a similar vibe, I would say. From Sheffield, Joe Carnell, Lewis Carnell, his brother Joe Green and Tom Rowley. Their all-music bio says that they're a Sheffield rock group who quickly made a name for themselves. I wonder why that was. Could it have anything to do with the fact they were another Sheffield band who often supported the Arctic Monkeys? I would call them, if there's any fans of 60s music out there, the Jerry and the Pacemakers to the Arctic Monkeys, the Beatles. A band that basically gets a record deal because they're from the same city as a hot group. Although the difference, of course, is that Jerry and the Pacemakers had number 1 hits of their own, rather than 2 top 40 hits that missed the top 20, of which this is the second and last. Interesting, actually, at this point, how they refuse to talk about the Arctic Monkeys in interviews such as one with OMH. The band are closely linked to the Arctic Monkeys, and not just geographically. It becomes clear they are keen to stay away from this subject for now, however, understandably preferring to talk about themselves rather than their mates. A simple yes is all that's required from Tom when asked if they know them well, followed by complete silence. Later, their management confirms the closeness of their relationship, almost of sibling intensity. It's almost like they sort of know why they have a record deal and don't really want to talk about it or admit it to themselves. They all met playing football, which we've talked about before as being a sign of that we're moving to the landfill indie era. But I think there's another crucial key to what separates landfill indie from the good indie here, and I believe it's in that Music OMH interview again. They say, "We take the Jam as one of our influences, as every modern band should." And this is a big difference from bands who were taking inspiration from sort of obscure groups, like you get a lot of early indie that comes from Gang of Four, who never got anywhere near the top 40, and now you're getting bands that are taking inspiration from groups who have like number one singles like The Jam and Oasis. And that's the problem that we are increasingly heading into. Not that Milburn will last for that much longer. In January 2008, there was an Enemy report that the band had been telling their fans that they had become disenchanted with music, and even the frontman was giving up music to attend Oxford. However, at that time, a spokesperson for the band categorically denied that the group were calling it a day. They haven't split, they are continuing writing and looking forward to touring throughout the year. Stay posted. And we did stay posted until April 2008, when Milburn announced that they were splitting up. They claimed there had been no falling out and they remained friends and supporters of each other. Not everyone in the music media understood us, but you, the fans, did. And over the last 2 to 3 years, we've shared some amazing experiences that we'll never forget, and we feel very privileged to have done so. They would eventually reform in 2017. There's a lot of indie bands who we've actually seen doing this. They make an album on Pledge Music, which is basically where fans pay to support the album, and then you deliver it directly to them. Before that, though, 2 members of the band join Reverend and the Makers, who I've written in my notes. Reverend and the Makers are a band that make Milburn look like the Arctic Monkeys, although I'm not sure that's fair because Heavyweight Champion of the World is a much better song than anything Milburn managed. I find them one of the dullest indie bands that we'll ever talk about, and so let's move on to a band that they make look good. The Kooks with Naive. Now 17 weeks on this chart. It's very possible the Kooks have become our first 20-week club from an indie rock band in just under a month's time. That's exciting, isn't it?
31.
We Are Your Friends, Justice vs. Simeon, taking a 10-place drop in its 3rd week on the chart. That was last week, should have been a number 1.
30.
And here, next to it, is a new entry that was very nearly our stinker of the week. They were very lucky that there was a ballad that was even more treacly further on this list that saved them from the stinker of the week club. Also, they are a much missed element of this chart. I don't think we've had a flop girl band on this list since Clear in 2004. So I'm so glad we have another one here. I say they were a flop, but they were actually very successful, just not at all in the UK. They're called Nylon. This is their new entry, Losing a Friend.
29.
A very hard band to research on Nylon. You search Nylon, of course you get the fabric. You search Nylon band, and you get shocking results for bands of that fabric. And then even when I search Nylon girl band, I get all the times Nylon magazine has interviewed a girl band, which is many a time. However, we persist for your benefit. And so that's why I know they are literally the Icelandic Spice Girls in terms of the success they had in their native country. They are Alma Gudmundsdottir. Steinen. Okay, so in her name she has one of those Icelandic letters that's sort of like a P, but like the round bit of it sort of slipped down to the middle. I'm going to say like Steinendora Camilla Sigurdardóttir and Clara Ósk Eliasdóttir. 12 number 1 hits they had in Iceland, including this one. Losing a Friend is written by Chris and Tony Griffiths, previously of a band called The Real People, who at least here are beating their previous chart peak as a band, which was when the track Believer got to number 38 in 1992. Although they are the Icelandic Spice Girls, Iceland does only have 395,000 people in it, so it's perhaps not surprising that they are going for a bigger market like the UK, and they're certainly willing to work for it. I found a blog post from someone who had filmed them as they came to London. Nylon's first UK gigs were an eye-opener. For several weeks they toured UK schools, putting on free performances, often twice a day, and then perhaps a local nightclub appearance. It was a fairly grueling schedule, and I can vouch that the band sang live rather than miming. That's a lot of hard work, bundling up and down the motorways in an SUV. They did, however, get to do a picturesque Icelandic video where the wind was so bad, and they were doing it at the Icelandic coast, that people were advised not to walk any closer than 20 metres from the edge of the cliffs, for fear of being blown off. But this writer continues, emergency vodka supplies were passed round, and driving back through the dark night across a glacier, I witnessed the majesty of the Northern Lights. which honestly all sounds great, and it makes you think they should have just stayed in Iceland. It certainly sounds better than doing a lot of grotty school gigs for no money and going up and down the M1. This song was named Woolworths' Single of the Week, and Nylon did support Westlife, Girls Aloud, McFly and Journey South, which is actually appropriate, I guess, because they had done a Journey South from Iceland. But none of this enough to break them here. This, a number 29 hit. Their only other single in the UK will be a song called Closer, which gets no closer to the top 10, peaking as it does at number 64, even though it was a double A-side single which also featured their cover of the Eurythmics standard Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. Number 1 on the commercial dance charts apparently, but not so on the singles chart. Amelia shortly after left the band, and the other 3 members renamed themselves as the Charlies, trying to sort of do a Nuts magazine sort of raunchier image that goes even less well than their time as Nylon. By 2008, they had returned to Iceland and announced they had disbanded, saying they missed their family in Iceland and presumably missed having any hits in the UK. And so another flop girl band bites the dust. Don't worry, Girls Aloud will be back on these charts very soon with Something Kinda Ooh and Sugar Babes with Easy. So actually we still have great girl band songs to come in 2006. This is just not one of them.
28.
Fill My Little World by The Feeling. That's been filling the chart now for 9 weeks.
Come fill my little world.
27.
A song entering the chart here, very likely for a top 10 placement next week. One of the big male singer-songwriters of the year. Like James Blunt, if he'd been gargling ground glass since being a child. This is James Morrison with You Give Me Something.
You give me something.
And what the British public gave him was the 25th biggest selling song of the year, in between Put Your Records On by Corinne Bailey Rae and My Chemical Romance's Welcome to the Black Parade. Here's James Morrison talking about You Give Me Something.
I just wanted to write a young man's love song. That was not so loving, you know, like there was so many sort of, like at that time for me, writing an all-out love song was like a no-go. So I was trying to write a song that was a love song but in disguise. And that's kind of what I liked about it. I like the fact that it was sort of jazzy.
21 years old he was at this point. From rugby, came to the attention of many in the music industry after supporting Corinne Bailey Rae. So interesting, he is below her in that biggest selling songs of the year list. Very much him and Paolo Nutini. It's crazy actually, they've launched them like a week apart from each other. You would have thought that you wouldn't want them to fight directly for that slot. But again, I can't emphasise this enough. Despite having many opinions about how people should run their careers, no one in the music industry has ever cared to ask me to help. I would say that James Morrison, by the way, makes Paolo Nutini seem like the most interesting man in the world in comparison to him, although this is the first of his 8 top 40 hits, which include nearly a number 1 hit with Broken Strings, of course his duet with Nelly Furtado, with a hilarious music video that has the biggest "these two people never met" vibes of any music video I've ever seen. That song was kept off the number 1 spot by Lady Gaga's Poker Face, which is totally correct. Morrison, born to a soul-loving mother and a folk and country-loving father, he attributes his distinctively croaky voice to a bout of whooping cough that nearly killed him when he was a baby. He's said that his mother was a bit of a hippie. I think that suggests she wasn't vaccinating her kids. And, well, actually, I was going to say it didn't really work for her, but I guess it did work for her because it made her son very famous. I don't know how I've accidentally backed myself into an anti-vax message there, but I have, so let's just move on. He got into music when his Uncle Joe showed him how to play a blues riff, although he said, a generally unhappy childhood touched by poverty and illness. He told The Guardian, "My mum and dad split up when I was 4, and I lived in Rugby, which is one of the worst places I've ever been. There was a lot of mental health, alcohol and drug issues in my family, and from a young age I thought that was what life was. We struggled to pay the bills. Mum was always going on about the mortgage not being paid, and we never had food in the fridge. I'd often miss breakfast and lunch and just have dinner when I got home from school. When I got to about 10, I remember asking Mum, what job do I need to do to get out of poverty? She said I should get into graphic design because I was good at drawing. I tried it for a bit, but since I picked up a guitar, I've binned off the art. Music was more expressive and allowed me to have an outlet for all my emotional shit. I'd actually had a guitar when I was 5, but I'd smashed it up because my sister told me I was crap." As a teenager, he is in Newquay, busking in local pubs and on the streets. But it was while living in Derby that his demos were picked up by Polydor Records, leading, of course, to his chart success here. I, for some reason, get a lot of Derby content on my TikTok, despite being, a soft southerner. And they have a beautiful mosaic sort of Derby Walk of Fame in their street, which has Lara Croft, because she was developed there or something. I wonder if James Morrison's got one of those. But James Morrison in The Guardian continues, when I was starting out, reality TV would have been the easy route to become a musician. I watched an episode of Fame Academy and I thought I could sing as good as some of the contestants, so I sent a tape in. A few weeks later, the producers wrote me a letter saying they weren't interested. Please don't contact us, that sort of thing. I carried on playing gigs, but I could have easily given up and got trapped in my van cleaning job. I was a good worker, but it was disgusting tidying up after builders. I used to find a lot of horrible old pasties on the floor. Eventually, I met a random guy in a pub who went on to become my manager. In a few weeks, he'd got me meetings with loads of record labels. This followed by a very well-received appearance on Jules Holland, and that Corinne Bailey Rae opening slot made him one of the most hotly tipped artists of 2006. Here, giving him a top 30 for now, very likely to make the top 10, if not top 5 next week. Has some major songwriting talent behind it, as well as James Morrison. This was co-written by Egg White, a regular on this show for being a frequent Will Young collaborator. He got his first number 1 with Leave Right Now. This song reached number 1 in New Zealand. The album, which it is heralding Undiscovered, goes on to sell 1.5 million copies and wins James Morrison a Brit Award for Male Solo Artist. And in interviews, he actually gives us the first glimpse that I've seen in interviews of how an album deal works. We've often speculated on this show that people get dropped from their record label because of disappointing sales of their album. And he says that they literally said to him he had to sell over 100,000 copies of the first album to get a second one. As well as continuing his own music career, James Morrison has become a songwriter, working with people like Demi Lovato, Kelly Clarkson, and Marco Carter, a Italian singer whose single Quello Che Dai apparently topped the Italian charts in 2010. He also wrote songs for Ollie Murs, which I've increasingly discovered that literally every mid-tier British musician ended up writing for Ollie Murs at a certain point. Most famously, I would say Preston from the Ordinary Boys ends up working with him quite a lot. And so that's James Morrison. He's likely to shoot up this chart next week, and if he doesn't, he'll be back with a single called Wonderful World in October. But we have a wonderful world of 2006 pop music to keep talking about this week, so let's continue doing that. I'm going to put the charger into my laptop because it's dying. That's a little peek behind the curtain for those of you. A little bit of Brechtian alienation for you theatre fans there.
26.
An easier affair. Having not an easy time on this chart, dropping 13 places after peaking at number 13 last week.
They're having too much fun.
Very interesting. George Michael, a classic sort of tragic case of not appreciated while he was alive, and then as soon as he died, everyone being like, oh, what a genius he was. And I'm like, well, he was still releasing good songs, you just didn't give a fuck. So think on that. And we're going to think on MyMyMy by Armand van Helden.
25. 24.
Lost Prophets with Rooftops, a Liberation broadcast. The less said about the Lost Prophets, the better. So let's move on to my Should Have Been a number 1.
Song that should have been this week.
Which instead is at number 23, although it is coming in on downloads. So that's a good sign that it will get a good place next week. Although a big step down from the last time that this band charted on the chart. At that point, they charted at number 1 and had the biggest selling song of the year, even though I think this song is actually much better. It is Gnarls Barkley, and this is Smiley Faces.
23.
And I can tell you know how hard this life can be.
So should have been a number 1 this week, and maybe the best music video of the year. Well worth watching. Pause this podcast and watch it now. And not just because if you do that, I think Spotify counts it as 2 separate streams. Don't do it because of that. Do it because the video for Smiley Faces is great. It's sort of Forrest Gump style. You know how the sort of amazing bit in Forrest Gump where they've superimposed Forrest Gump into like famous moments in history. They do that. It's the idea is it's this music historian trying to find out who this mysterious guy called Gnarls Barkley is. And so Danger Mouse and CeeLo Green keep popping up like they'll be behind the Beatles, behind Jimi Hendrix. Very cool. Here's what the Enemy said of this track. How epic was all that, eh? Gnarls Barkley's stomping, world-destroying debut single only finished its 9-week reign at the top of the pop charts because their record company, nicking a trick out of Wet Wet Wet's book, actually deleted the song so it couldn't irritate Fern Cotton any longer. Well, can you imagine what would have happened if they didn't? Fast forward to 2097, everyone's buggering about with jetpacks, all wearing genetically engineered trousers, and I Think I'm Crazy, thank you, is still blaring out of every speaker in the land, while the cryogenically frozen duo behind it continue to make rowdy guest appearances via their Flash private jet, or at least their heads and accompanying jars do. okay, who put 10p in the NME writer. As jolly as it sounds, it's no longer possible because the playing field has been cleared for Gnarls Barkley's British competitors themselves, and they've only bloody well gone and done it again. Messrs CeeLo and Danger Mouse have created more blazing Motown for the modern man, where searing quasi-religious soul vocals flutter over dirty bass and pumped-up nods to spaceship electro. Like Outkast before them, their odd couple future-focused hip-hop is as immediate as bubonic plague, and you can almost see the Manhattan block parties full of kids arsing about in front of fire hydrants to its bottom-bouncing rhythms. The real question, though, is will we still be hearing it in 2097? That single review very much highlighting the issue that Gnarls Barkley are having here, that even in a single review of another single, they spend the first half of it talking about how good Crazy was. They can never escape from under the shadow of it, despite, in my opinion, doing an equally good song here. It says a lot about their stratospheric rise. They were interviewed by Q Magazine in mid-2006, and their first ever gig as a two-piece was at Coachella, in front of 60,000 people. It makes those bands that we talk about who get a record deal after 4 gigs seem like old hands at the road. As with Crazy, what makes this song so good is it's this deep layer of sort of quite strange melancholy to it, and certainly CeeLo Green has been through some times. He has already been divorced from the mother of his daughters and lost his previous record deal thanks to poor sales. Crazy to think that as all that was going on, he was writing Don't Show by the Pussycat Dolls, but he was. Asked where he gets the subject of his sort of downbeat lyrics from, CeeLo Green just casually says as an example, I was 17 when my mother was paralysed in an accident. I had a very strong-willed mother, and to watch her suffer, that was the most helpless I ever felt. So that's cheery, isn't it? Put on a smiling face indeed. At one point, though, this was CeeLo Green's least favourite song on the album, as he told Entertainment Weekly. He thought, Smiley Faces was too simple and to the point at first. Danger Mouse told me, listen, I promise if you write and complete the song, this will be one of those ones. For some reason I trusted him. I trusted him, the friend I never had. I was down to go all the way to the death, figuratively, for him and with him. This was the guy whose entire relationship kind of started on a lie. So CeeLo meets him backstage at a gig and says, oh, I'd really like to do a song with you. And Danger Mouse says that I don't do songs, I only do albums. He said he was bluffing, but worked out very well for him. They say that this song is basically from the perspective of a fan talking about why they like sort of a tortured pop star. The idea they're putting this smiling face on the sort of drudgery and depression of the world. Meanwhile, though, Danger Mouse being a little SB at this point, a silly boy, you can go to our TikTok for more on this, but he got involved with Banksy, who both pulled a prank on Paris Hilton, replacing her album in UK record stores with a sort of doctored version that sort of makes fun of her. At the time, I'm sure it felt like, you know, a battle in the fight for quote-unquote real music. Now it kind of looks like bullying, to be honest. Kind of looks like the sort of lame, vaguely making a point thing that kind of, if we're honest, is what most of Banksy's stuff is really like. But there is one of these Banksy doctored copies of Paris Hilton's album on eBay right now for $5,000. So if anybody wants to donate that to me, I can buy that. And then we can all have a look at it. And won't that be nice? We'll see where Smiley Faces ends up next week. Of course, their last single, a huge number 1 hit for, 9 weeks, was it? We'll see if this gets anywhere close to that next week. But we have to head ever closer to the top 20. We're now at
22.
With Supermassive Black Hole by Muse. And at 21, Sergio Mendes and the Black Eyed Peas with Mash Canada.
21.
The last of the vaguely football... Oh, no, that's not even true, is it? Because Hips Don't Lie weirdly became like an unofficial World Cup song. That's still in the chart, as is Mash Canada from the Nike World Cup ad, despite the 2006 World Cup being finished by now, which, thank God, we don't have to talk about another shitty football song, presumably until the 2008 Euros. Oh, joy. But there is joy to be had here because we are now at
The top 20.
Well, that means songs still to come from ... as he scrolls up with his research document, Dirty Pretty Things, James Dean Bradfield, Rihanna, and Shayne Ward. Bit of something for everyone there, isn't there? The first of those is here at number
20.
It's a Dirty Pretty Things, a song I really liked at the time. I feel that my opinion about this band is being swayed by reading a lot of sort of indie blogs of the mid-2000s being like, aren't Dirty Pretty Things shit? I didn't think so at the time, so I really need to stick to my former guns and say that I like this song. At 20, a new entry, Deadwood. So they profile the Dirty Pretty Things in Q Magazine, and the first thing that Carl Barat says in that interview is, I made a point of drawing a line. There had to be a complete severance. The Libertines sort of exist in my heart and mind, but this is called Moving On. And I'd say it's not quite a severance, is it, Carl Barat? Because your two members of the Libertines are still in your band, and often at gigs you will play Libertines songs. So I can't really give you any credit for that whatsoever, really. They're basically the Baby Shambles if Baby Shambles weren't an actual shambles. As Carl Barat says, I'm lucky I can't perform my functions if I'm in a different state of mentality. Drinking breaks down my inhibitions, but you just write crap if you use cocaine. And this is kind of working for him. The Dirty Pretty Things album, Waterloo to Anywhere, went in at number 3, which was 7 places higher than the Baby Shambles album, Down in Albion. Unfortunately, though, this song has an unfortunate legacy, which in 2006 it was used as the theme tune to the Russell Brand show. Many people have seen this as the song on this album that responds to his falling out with Pete Doherty. Carl Barat telling Clash Music, it's quite self-explanatory. I'm not pointing any fucking fingers or digging up any dirt, not digging up any deadwood. We talk about digging out the deadwood, not bringing it up. You know what I mean. To which I say, no, not entirely. You got the world, boy, this all you make it. You had the choice, lad, you wouldn't take it. The oldest charm, only the best for you. And the years of my life, some they were so good, but now and again I feel I was a coward. Are the holes in my soul in tatters for all these tears? Take that, Pete. By December 2008, this band had played their final gig after their second album could only make it to number 35, presumably not selling those 100,000 copies that they needed to get another album. Interestingly, in the announcement that the Dirty Pretty Things are splitting up, Carl Barat makes it explicitly clear that he's not splitting up to reform the Libertines. He says, it is with some sadness we announce the farewell of the Dirty Pretty Things. It's been a glorious 3 years which we would all gladly live out again, but it's time for us to try new things, not the Libertines. In brackets. We are reluctant to give up touring, but we will give the last waltz everything. We have and are determined to go out as we came in, after which we will have other ventures to be getting on with. Okay, Diva. Oh, it's not going to be the Libertines, is it? Well, by 2009, Barat and Pete Doherty reunited at a tribute show to a concert promoter, and a year later, the full band reunited for gigs at Leeds and Reading, at which point Carl Barat does what people were probably presuming he was going to do in 2008, which was release a solo album, which kind of went nowhere, so it's not a surprise that the Libertines is the thing that he ended up doing the most. They released a third album in 2015 and a fourth album after that. But first, the Dirty Pretty Things will have one more top 40 later in the year. I believe it's called Wandering, and I'm wondering where it will go on this chart. We'll find out in the autumn.
19.
Now, though, From Paris to Berlin by Infernal. That song really stuck in the top 10 for a long time, but now, after it's left it, making a quicker slide down these charts, dropping 4 places, which I think is the biggest drop that it's had so far. Putting it behind another new entry, this is a man who's had 2 number ones as part of a band. If I tell you that those 2 number ones are called The Masses Against the Classes, and If You Tolerate This, Then Your Children Will Be Next, then of course you and I know. It's James Dean Bradfield, the lead singer of the Manic Street Preachers, with his solo debut, That's No Way to Tell a Lie. That's no way to tell a lie. This is from Chartwatch blog. On the basis of the first single, it is clear that the desire to do something a bit different was the driving force behind this track. The new wave handclap rhythm and breezy pop feel of the single, ensuring this is a track that the Manic Street Preachers would never dream of putting their names to. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think it sounds pretty Manics, but he does point out the Manics are not the only group to have succumbed to solo fever at the present time, with Radiohead frontman Tom York this week debuting at number 3 on the album charts with his own personal offering, The Eraser. Actually a great album, much better than the James Dean Bradfield album. And this isn't just all a awkward segue into moving to the album chart. This week, for the second week in a row, Muse are at number 1 with their Black Holes and their Revelations, keeping the Kooks at number 2 for the second week in a row. Although the Kooks can't make it to number 1, we have to appreciate the one hell of a climb they've taken to get to number 2. 6 months ago, the album was released. And indeed, after 3 weeks from its release, it dropped out of the top 40 entirely and then clawed its way back. The only other new entries this week, 20 years ago, were the Guillemots album Through the Window Pane at 17. We talked about their first single, Made Up Love Song, number 43, probably 2-3 weeks ago. And a reissue of the greatest hits of Billy Joel is at 16. Who was the band that we were talking about last week who did that awful football-based cover of We Didn't Start the Fire? It's like he knew that was going to happen and had to remind us that actually that song was good as they sort of shat on it. So that was the album chart, and back to James Dean Bradfield, born in the small Welsh industrial city of Pontypool. His father wanted to name him Clint Eastwood Bradfield, but his wife said no, and they compromised on James Dean, of course, the American actor who died tragically young. Taking inspiration from bands like The Clash, James Bradfield formed the Manic Street Preachers with his cousin Shayne Ward. Apparently they used to share bunk beds as children, and their childhood friend Nicholas Jones, aka Nicky Wire. Nicky Wire convinced his university friend Richie Edwards to join the band, who became the Manic Street Preachers. Gained a lot of notoriety from their electric live gigs and an incident in which Richie Edwards was questioned whether he was sort of for real by the enemy, and he cut the word for real into his arm with a razor blade. Part of a increasing amount of erratic behaviour from Richie Edwards, who in February 1995 would disappear with his abandoned car found on a bridge near Bristol, where I'm from. I believe it's got to be the Clifton Suspension Bridge, so I have probably been to the very spot where Richie Edwards was last seen, which is a little spooky to think about. I probably went there. There was a time in Bristol where, to celebrate like the 100th anniversary of Bristol Zoo or something, there were all these monkey statues everywhere, so I was probably looking for a monkey statue, instead walking on the sort of, this spooky indie rock landmark. It's funny how cities are, aren't they? The palimpsest nature of the city, as I would have said back in my pretentious university days, as opposed to my sad populist days, sipping tea in front of a microphone at 11 o'clock at night talking about the solo work of a Manic Street Preacher. It's very hot in here. That's why these last few episodes have been increasingly deranged. Point is, Rich Edwards disappears. The Manic Street Preachers release their album Everything Must Go, which is this sort of album of them dealing with this shock. Of course, contains probably their best single, A Design for Life. That was sort of their peak. Then their first number one single with If You Tolerate This, Then Your Children Will Be Next in 98. But there was a sense that they were sort of running out of steam by the mid-2000s. 2001 album Know Your Enemy and 2004 album Lifeblood, both less well reviewed than their others, and so the band took a move which you have to respect them for, which is they realised they were sort of running out of steam, and so they took a deliberate 2-year break in which they would sort of recharge their batteries. But James Dean Bradfield said that pretty much a few weeks in he was bored out of his mind, and so decided to make a solo album, the first fruits of which we are picking right now. Music was an itch I couldn't scratch, he told The Telegraph. It was either make a solo record or join a bar band. The album is called The Great Western, written mostly on train journeys from Cardiff to London Paddington on the Great Western Railway, which, again, is the railway. I've often taken the Paddington to Cardiff train, so I could have written a solo album instead of, I don't know, read old issues of Smash Hits or whatever the fuck I did. Drink M&S tinnies, probably mostly, and listen to Bewitched. All Music was positive about this album, saying he may front the band, the Manic Street Preachers, but he doesn't write the words. An odd situation for a group so charged and personal as this, but that does mean Bradfield is the ideal choice for a solo album, since it would promise to reveal a side of him thus far unheard on record. He said of this time to Music Week, "We'd internalised everything too much and become a bit too questioning. We were just suffering from large doses of paralysis through analysis, really, so we took a break after Lifeblood. Nick did his solo album, I did my solo album, and then we did 2007 Send Away the Tigers, which was a massive rebirth for us." Nick used an analogy about having to reconnect. You can't reconnect with your audience if you can't reconnect with what you originally were, and I understood that. So we went back to that guitar-driven anthemic rock that still had undercurrents of punk and rock classicism, with strong pop conscience and the ability to write about politics and not make it seem dogmatic. We will get another solo single from James Dean Bradfield, but the next Manic Street Preachers single, which I think is in 2007, is the fantastic Your Love Alone Is Not Enough, their duet with Nina Persson from the Cardigans, a great song, well worth them taking a break if that was the result we got after the end of it. For some reason, during the press campaign for this album, he started a feud with Nirvana, of all people, telling Music Week, "Nirvana destroyed a generation of people. They gave them a gateway to an alternative world without getting a badge first, and took them to that world which, at the end of the day, was just bad metal." And we'll see which other major bands he starts a beef with when his second single comes later in the year, that song called An English Gentleman. We have to talk about some American women first. Well, an American woman and a Barbadian woman. The American is Pink, who is dropping one place after 2 months in the chart with Who Knew?
17.
'Cause you said forever.
16.
We are heading to Barbados for Rihanna with her, fourth single now? Coming in on downloads at 16. This is Unfaithful.
I can see him dying. I don't wanna do this.
Ends up as the 23rd biggest selling song of the year, so 2 places above James Morrison. She sells 177,000 copies of that, putting her in between Mex, Thunder in My Heart Again, and Corinne Bailey Rae's Put Your Records On. It's been a crazy few years for Rihanna. Discovered in her native Barbados by an American producer in 2015, signed with Def Jam Records at 16, and by 17 she released her debut album, and her first hit, Ponder Replay. Then At 18, her first single from A Girl Like Me. Her second album was SOS, a US number 1 single. This single, not a UK or US number 1. Well, we don't know about the UK yet, but in the US it only makes it to number 6. But shows that she's going to continue having legs. All those people who worried she was a one-hit wonder after Ponder Replay are being proven wrong, showing she can do a whole other style of music with this slower, quite intense ballad. This is definitely a place she would return to again in her career. Think about a song like Russian Roulette, which is equally ridiculously overblown, actually even more so than this track. So far, her lowest charting single in the UK is If It's Lovin' That You Want, which should only make it to number 11. I think this is getting in these charts and downloads at number 16. I think that's going to remain her lowest selling song for a while. We talked about this when Neo released Sexy Love a few weeks ago, but this was written by him and his producers Stargate, making a Stargate-like leap into these stars here, going from writing songs for Hearsay and S Club 7 to writing with Rihanna and Beyonce. Here's Neo talking about writing this song.
Unfaithful came from a story that my sister was telling me about a dude that she was dating back in the day. You know, she might get mad at me for telling this story, but it is. Tell it. She was dealing with this dude, and it was that whole situation of he's just too nice. Right. He's so nice. Like I literally just walk over his back. He's so nice. So because he was so nice, she started dealing with somebody else. Right. And it got to the point where like everybody knew. And it's like okay, she's doing what she's doing. The whole family knows. Her friends know. His friends know. The only person that's acting like they don't know is him.
Initially inspired by the work of Evanescence, surprisingly. It was going to be called Murderer, and you can definitely still hear the slight influence of a track like My Immortal. Rihanna actually said that before moving to America for her record deal, she'd actually never heard rock music. This was like the first time she was being exposed to anything like Evanescence or like a power ballad. Rihanna actually wanted Neo to work on her first album, but they haven't been able to make it work. She heard Mario's Let Me Love You, which he also wrote, and was determined to get him on her second album. And I would say that Rihanna, not quite media trained at this point, has a very strange interview. I'm not sure where I got this from, where she's asked about the meaning of the song, which she says, I always put it out there that guys cheat, and finally someone to put it in perspective, girls cheat too. Oh, this is with Newsday. She said that this song was birthed out of a relationship she outgrew when she was 14, then realising that was basically saying that she was like cheating on men when she was 14, had to state that the relationship was not physical. Basically, she got caught in a lie and then doubled down on it when in fact it was written, as Neo said, about one of his aunts. And actually, Rihanna's misspeaking here kind of sums up a slight issue with this song, which is kind of pointed out by Slant in their review of the album, calling this one of the gushy, adult-orientated ballads that are at least a decade too mature for the teenage singer's minor vocal talents. She's got the S Club Juniors problem, as it's known on this podcast, singing songs that are about intense adult emotions that she has clearly never felt in her life. They go on. Unfaithful is, if nothing else, an ambitious second single for an artist like Rihanna, and with lyrics like, I don't want to be a murderer, I'll love his trust, I might as well take a gun and put it to his head, it earns bonus points just for being so fucking weird. And certainly, the song aside, it is part of a dark time for the music video that we're heading into. It is notable the product placement in this video for the Nokia phone. It does speak of an interesting time before the iPhone became like the go-to phone, when there was all these weird little phones that were trying to become like the biggest phone by appearing in music videos. But of course it leads to product placement ruining basically every music video for 5 years. I don't want to get into Madonna here necessarily. I mean, yeah, I do actually. It's why Madonna's videos are better than Lady Gaga's, because even something like Bad Romance, which is an amazing music video, or the Telephone video, ruins itself by just the constant product placement. Anyway, so we'll see where Unfaithful goes next week, but I can tell you that in 2010 it returns to the chart at number 31 after Rihanna performed it with Matt Cardle at the 2010 X Factor final. As we've said, this is the point where people have to start taking Rihanna a little bit seriously. The guy who discovered her, Evan Rogers, told Vulture of this time. Around Ponder Replay, people used to tell me she's so cute, but she can't really sing, and you don't care because she's just so cute. I would get so angry because I always knew she would be that girl that would eventually be doing songs like Stay and Diamonds. But I think the first time I felt like other people got it was Umbrella. That's in 2 singles time for her. First, we'll get a third single from this album, We Ride, in October. We'll see whether that can ride all the way to the top spot later in the year. First, though,
15
is Valerie by the Zootons, 5th week on the chart for that.
Why don't you come on over, Valerie?
And I believe this is our highest new entry at number
14.
Yes, indeed it is. This a big drop-off for this guy. A number 1 hit with That's My Goal, the second biggest selling song of 2005. No Promises, also no slouch in this chart, getting all the way to number 2. Seemed that Shayne Ward's solo career was going quite well until this is peaking at number 14. It's our stinker of the week.
Stinker of the week.
So this is called Stand By Me, and I had to give him credit for releasing a new track called Stand By Me rather than just doing a cover of the Benny King track, which, let's be honest, is what Steve Brookstein would have done. But this is prime ballad slop, and I don't like it. And it's a stinker of the week, and so I'll let you have a smell of it yourself.
14.
Chartwatch blog, we're counting him out. Number 14 is the chart placement of the single after shop sales, not just downloads, and as such will rank as a rather spectacular flop. In truth, his appeal was hardly likely to sustain itself beyond a couple of singles. And actually, surprisingly, and to his credit, he is able to get back up with another album, and indeed back into the top 10 a number of times. Part of that perhaps due to his getting in early with a producer and songwriter called Savan Kotecha. He wrote this. He also wrote No You Hang Up and Breathless, two of Shayne Ward's biggest hits to come. And he then goes on to bigger and much better music. He will end up with at least 6 UK number 1 singles, 2 for Ariana Grande, Problem and Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored, 1 for Jessie J, which of course also features Ariana Grande, Bang Bang. He also wrote Alexandra Burke's Start Without You, JLS's The Club Is Alive. Oh, one of the worst songs ever. Oh, I was watching The Sound of Music and I thought, oh, this could be a really good club track. If that happened to me, I'd be like, I need to stop drinking in the evenings. And also One Direction's What Makes You Beautiful, he co-wrote. Although his most important work, according to me, is Jerry's Ride It, which he co-wrote. And because, of course, we always love to bring it back to Madonna, he wrote the rather underrated Rebel Heart bonus track, Addicted. As you may have noticed from his number 1 list, works with a lot of X Factor winners and contestants, so much so that he actually eventually will become the vocal coach for the contestants on the show. And worth talking about him rather than Shayne Ward, because Shayne Ward is boring after we talked about all the sort of dodgy stuff happening in his family. And this guy's quite interesting. At the age of 15, he decided that he wanted to be a professional musician, but his traditional Indian family did not really approve. And so he sort of went to prove them wrong, ended up writing songs in his bedroom and sending out hundreds of demo tapes to basically any sort of address he could get for anyone in the music industry. So one of the few replies he got was from Jive Records, whose artists include NSYNC and Britney Spears. They wanted songs for a boy band that they were going to launch. However, Savan says, I can't, because I've met this guy in Nashville who promised to make me a star. All I have to do is give him a little bit of money. I'm sure that then the A&R guy's like, sounds like a scam. But he says, no, I'm going to wait for him. So he says, okay, thank you. I guess I won't write any songs for Jive Records then. But it turns out that the band that he could have written for was the Backstreet Boys, who of course go on to sell millions and millions of records, although Savan has always seen this as a good thing, sort of being like, I was too young and not ready. If I'd got the opportunity, I would have wasted it. And so his family give him a ultimatum. They're like, you can try and become a professional musician. We'll give you 2 years. And if you can't make it work in 2 years, you will go back to college and do something more sensible. So he says, okay, and then goes out and tries to get a songwriting deal. He goes to the South by Southwest festival with a bag of clothes. And so basically he'd sneak in, give his demo tape to like every like famous person he could see. He'd get caught by security, go around the corner, change his clothes and go back in and repeat the same thing. He actually stretched the 2-year limit by a few months, but eventually gets a publishing deal with BMG, which obviously puts him in the Simon Cowell orbit, because Sony BMG also where Simon Cowell is, and they send him to work for Max Martin. On the way to meet Max Martin in Stockholm, he ends up meeting another young songwriter called Red One.
Red one.
Who invites Savan to stay in his studio flat, which is literally a studio. He slept under the mixing desk for 6 months, learning all of the magic of Swedish pop. Stays in Sweden for 6 years, marries a Swedish girl, eventually makes it in the US after scoring a number 1 single for Carrie Underwood, the American Idol winner, at which point he becomes an in-demand songwriter, finally gets to actually produce a song with Max Martin. He worked on If You Seek Amy with the great Swedish producer. All of which is more exciting than Shayne Ward, although he is going through a difficult patch in his career, not just this flop single, but also he had just learned that he had vocal cord nodules. This is in summer 2006. It was very serious indeed because it caused me so many major problems that I couldn't sing. I had the operation last year in August. This is August 2006. I asked the doctor and I said I needed him to be straight with me. Is there a chance that it might not come back? And he said it was straight down the line, 50-50, you may not get your voice back. All of this medical problems mean that there will be no new Shayne Ward songs until October of next year. How will I cope? Says a man who knows he will cope completely fine without having to listen to Shayne Ward for over a year. So with that being the highest new entry, let's look at where some songs that entered the chart on downloads alone have got, keeping a special eye on 2 tracks. I Love My Chick by Busta Rhymes, which was at 23 last week, and Voodoo Child by the Rogue Traders, which was at number 18. We'll see whether either of them can knock Lily Allen off the top spot.
13. 12.
Another song that was released last week, dropping 3 places, World Hold On Children of the Sky by Bob Sinclair.
Open up inside.
11.
The Kooks, their second appearance on this chart, which She Moves in Her Own Way, now been on this chart for a month.
Moving on to better things.
The top 10.
Let's keep counting through it. Neo, not only writing the Rihanna track that we talked about earlier, but here at number
10.
with Sexy Love, which has been on this chart for a month. Buttons by Pussycat Dolls and Snoop Dogg, that's also been on this chart for a month.
9.
Coincidentally enough, they are being beaten in this chart by 1 place by a former collaborator of theirs, and indeed the man that appeared on their first number 1 single, Don't Ya, that's Busta Rhymes. His I Love My Chick is gone up 15 places in its second week to
8.
I love my girl cause she knows she the shit.
7.
is Razorlight with In the Morning, dropping 4 places in its third week.
No, we won't remember a thing.
While Paolo Nutini, number 5 last week, now at
6.
It'll be interesting to see whether James Morrison can beat Paolo Nutini next week, seeing as they are definitely fighting for that who's going to be the next James Blunt space.
Grant my last request and just let me hold you.
5.
Is a former number 1 I Wish I Was a Punk Rocker by Sandy Tom. I got very deeply annoyed by one of the lyrics in this track. I'm still doing all of the research on why she's entirely wrong about it, but I will definitely be ranting about that next week. So that's something to look forward to, isn't it? Probably.
With flowers in my hair.
Another number 1 is here at number
4.
Man-Eater by Nelly Furtado. And Rogue Traders are at number
3.
15 places up the chart for Voodoo Child. Was that, I believe, was last week should have been a number 1. If not, it bloody should have been. That leaves us with our top 2. It's the same top 2 as last week, Hips Don't Lie by Shakira and Smile by Lily Allen, but is it the same way round? Well, yes it is. Smile, its second week at number 1, selling 35,000 copies.
2.
Don't you see, baby, this is perfection.
And the success of this song, of course, Lily Allen, a big MySpace star, left the Chart Watch blog to sort of think about where the singles chart was at this point. How all this moving around the charts, Lily Allen came into this chart at number 18, I think, has sort of changed the way that music is promoted. Years ago, the singles chart was the only marketing tool they needed, an instant indicator to the public which singles and acts were hot and which were not worth the time of day. As focus switched to the initial entry point of a single, all that mattered was how much fuss you made about a new release and where it was ranked to the entrance to a shop to give it maximum impact. Now we are back to where we used to be, where the chart can work properly again as a promotional tool. What must be frustrating is that the traditional ways in which the listing was exposed appear to be on their last legs. Top of the Pops is soon to be no more. Sob, although in 2026 we are now getting 2000s Top of the Pops repeats on BBC4, which is fantastic. Commercial radio has chart shows which focus on entertainment value rather than true listings, whilst Radio 1 doesn't have a single chart countdown worthy of the name. Yeah, this is a long-running thing with Chart Watch blog at this point. They really hate who's doing the singles chart. Not sure why. With the summery vibes of the track dovetailing nicely with the steaming hot weather the UK is enjoying, the feeling of having a number 1 hit totally in keeping with the vibe of the moment is a nice feeling. Lily's biggest challenge comes from herself this week, with her debut album All Right Still hitting the shops. It remains to be seen whether people will keep buying the single or whether they'll buy the album instead, and we'll get another artist at number 1 next week. I certainly bought this album the week it came out and played it to death in my mum's car. Definitely with the aircon on, because quite like 2006 was very hot. On the 19th of July 2006, there was a recorded temperature of 36 degrees, which was a UK July temperature record at the time. Depressingly, in 2026, we've already beaten that. It got to 36.7 in June. What can I say? The world is literally burning, so let's bask for a few moments longer in 2006 when the world was still burning, just at a slightly less hot temperature. That 0.7 of a degree just makes me feel so cold inside. As for the download charts, It's another week where the places are reversed on the download charts, with Hips Don't Lie at number 1. Although it's worth looking at another song creeping its way up the download chart. That is Christina Aguilera's Ain't No Other Man. It went into the download chart a few weeks ago at number 14, then into the top 5, and this week, 20 years ago, it's at number 3, which is interesting as it will be on this single chart next week. Very strong download showing bodes well for whether Christina Aguilera can get her 5th number 1, Genie in a Bottle, Dirty, Beautiful, Lady Marmalade. Yes, her 5th number 1 with the first single from her 3rd album. That's a lot of numbers, isn't it? Ain't No Other Man. To do that, she will have to beat tracks from Chris Brown, Franz Ferdinand, McFly, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Sean Paul, and a little song which I remember being quite popular in 2006. You may not remember it now. It's called Chasing Cars. But if I lay here, listeners, if I just lay here, would you lie with me and recommend this podcast to your friends? Give us a 5-star review. Would you? Please. For Snow Patrol's sake. Visit our website at the 2000s Chart Show.wordpress.com for all of the places you can support the show and get much more 2000s goodness. It's not just about supporting me, it's about getting much more 2000s fun in your life, which is surely what we all want. And so thank you for listening. Here is your number 1 from 20 years ago, although maybe not for much longer, Lily Allen with Smile. 2 songs called Smile on this list. What a happy time.
1.
I see you cry, it makes me smile.
The club is alive.